In today's video I'm going to discuss the hardest thing to learn in plastering, and the main reason is that every plasterer needs to go through it because one, it'll make you a better plasterer, but two, it can make you the most amount of money if you learn this skill. We're going to discuss the biggest thing you can learn in plastering. A lot of the plasterers coming through just know how to skim walls, which is again, important for average day-to-day life, but there's one skill that will allow you to learn the full trade. So basically what I find the hardest thing, and this took me 4 years personally to master, is ruling plaster, or getting walls dead flat without the use of plasterboard, props, any stick on like that. We're talking about solid plastering where you can get plaster and turn it into a dead flat wall without the use of any board adhesive, plasterboard, anything solid. So I want to start this video by showing footage of me 5 years ago when I first started on YouTube. It is quite embarrassing because you really watched me try my best, but the practices behind it are really bad. So let's go straight to the clip. The best way to describe it is by just doing it. So here's a clip of me being absolutely rubbish at solid plastering. Let's do it now. Okay, let's let the carnage begin. This is a simple wall. There's 2 of us doing it, which isn't a great start, is it? It's a block wall, which was, I must admit, pretty plumb to begin with. The guy who built it did a real good job of it, so it's not even like it was dodgy. It was literally freshly made. It's an extension. We're applying hard wall. Yep, an internal product, so easier to use, but still. We were fairly new. I was fairly new to it. This is 5 years ago. I've not really done load of float set before. So the application process is fine. We're not going to go too much into it. We're applying a hard wall in 2 layers, as you should do. But then this is when we start ruling it. So the first thing you'll notice is I am quite jittery on the rule, I must admit. It's you can see where I'm leaving lumps, drag marks at the bottom. I've took a big old chunk at the top there. But I'm working off a bead on the left hand side, but you can see there's a lot of movement there and there's a lot of ripples in the plaster. So the good thing about this video is this makeshift spirit level, by the way, my friend made. Look at that, it's pretty cool with handles on that. So anyway, look at this. I've took that section off and go and apply. Oh, my friend's back, he's looking at the level, but I literally apply the hard wall right back onto it again. So not only have I ruled a section off, but I'm literally just bringing it back to the same point I started with. Now the problem is with this is I cannot find my levels, so despite using its spirit level, I'm not very good at gauging at this point what needs to come off and what needs to go on. So what I've done, and what a lot of newcomers will do, is I've just added that render plaster straight back onto the wall again, because I couldn't gauge whether the bottom needed to come in or the top needed to come out. So I'm literally just back to where I started. So I've ruled off again. Again, very jittery, a lot of movement in there, and a lot of humps have gone into the render. So it's not a straight line. My friend Charlie's ruling with one hand, which by the way is a big no-go. You want your one hand at the top, upper half of the rule, and your other hand at the bottom. Never do it one-handed. That's just silly. So he's gone one way, I'm going the other way. One sign, right, there's a massive lump in the middle where the rule hasn't touched it. That means the render in that section is way too low. So what I'm doing there, yeah, I've filled that section, which was good. I've gone back to the spirit level to see how we're looking. And again, I've just taken off the same stuff I've put on, and I'm right back at the same position where I started. I can't find where the gauge is. I can't find what my levels are, and it's a newcomer's thing, and it's very hard to do because I can't decipher whether the bottom needs to come out or the top needs to go in. So I'm just running around in circles, and I can be harsh on myself because this is me doing it, but a lot of beginners will do the same thing because it's very hard to find that level and find the gauge on where you're supposed to be. So at this point I think we've actually got a decent level. Bear in mind we're about 24 minutes in from application to this stage, and I'm not even joking. We're about 24 minutes in. So now what I'm doing, instead of ruling just horizontally and what I should have done at the beginning, I'm about to rule vertically, which is really important because you've got to rule both ways to get a truly plumb, straight, flat wall. Again, don't do one-handed like Charlie on the right. So I did vertically, but I'm back horizontally again. But we're getting to a point now we're starting to get a flat line. But it is very tough. It's very hard to get it right. And look, this still takes another 8 minutes, I think, after this. It really does take us some time, a lot of filling, a lot of toing and throwing, but as you can see, we're starting to get it flatter, and eventually I'm just cleaning up here. I'm just getting rid of any last minute high spots and going along the top. But eventually what we're left with is a truly flat plumb wall and level wall. But it does take time. It's very hard when you're starting out, and it can be very grueling doing it. And the rest of the video is talking about some tactics and ways to make it easier for you as you go along. But yeah, that is my journey, me being rubbish. Okay, so that was me 5 years ago. I've done a bit of solid plastering before that, so it's not even like it was my first go. But yeah, that is footage of me being absolutely rubbish at the trade. What I want to go into now is discuss why it's such a hard skill to learn and give you 5 tips on how you can improve towards getting better results when you're doing it. The reason it is so hard to learn is because you're getting flat walls from nothing. You're basically manipulating plaster to get it dead flat, but you've got no real gauge on how you're doing. And that's when I was putting the level back up to see if it was right, putting it back up to see if it was right. You're literally just doing it by eye. And this is, let me assure you, something that you will get better at with time. The more you do it, the better you're going to get it. It's like anything, it's just practice. So don't be disheartened when you don't get it right the first time. You've seen me mess up massively. You watched me fail, so don't be disheartened. Even me, who's a YouTuber and been successful enough to show you lots of videos on how to plaster, even me when I started was awful. And I never put that footage out, by the way. I never made that video because it was so embarrassing. But there you go, you can do it. But so here's the 5 tips I recommend on getting better at ruling, which lead to you becoming a renderer and working in every field of the plastering industry. Instead of just doing plastering, you can go from the outside, inside, and learn a full trade if you just learn this simple skill of ruling. Let's go into it now. Big tip I recommend is to start with the internal products. We're talking like the hard wall, bonding. Start with them first. Dealing with render, say sand cement, is a whole different kettle of fish, and it's very, very unpredictable. If you start inside though, just start maybe flattening surfaces that are a bit uneven. So we're saying, say if you're walking into a room, you've got a job and the wall isn't completely flat, that's when you start to learn on to using bonding. That is the best place to start. Just flattening small areas where you've got like 5-10 mil max out of place, and start practicing using the straight edge that way, because seriously, if you don't start small, then you won't ever be able to build up to the point when you can float and set a wall completely. So second tip is just keep practicing. Like I showed you in that video, it took me close to 6 minutes to get it anywhere near where it needed to be. Which is one, embarrassing to show, but two, it's the reality of what it's all about. It is a very hard thing to learn. It's definitely not easy, and it takes a lot of skill. 3, set up parameters. So if you are going to start doing a wall where you're going to float and set some screed bars up. Maybe set up some planks where you can run screeds using plaster. Make sure that line is completely plumb. Let that dry. Do the next one. And then what you've got is rails either side, and all you need to do is fill hard wall, render, whatever you're using in the centres, and then rule it off from the line to line. That is probably the easiest and best way to start doing float and set, because you've got something to work against. Now they do this a lot in Europe, they do it in a lot of countries actually, they probably do it here, but I've always been taught to do it freehand. Ultimately, if you can do it freehand, it's going to be the fastest way and most effective way, because you don't have to waste time setting up the bars. You can just throw the render plaster on the wall and then go from there to get it bang on. The 4th tip is just take your time. The good thing about using internal products is you have a lot of time to work with, but also it doesn't matter how much time you rule it, you keep filling it on. You haven't really got that worry of it coming back off. With sand cement, if you over rule a wall, you're going to pull the moisture from the back and essentially risk ruining the whole job. So that's the other thing. And tip number 5, the most important tip, work off beads if you can. Say if you've got a wall, you've got corners, fix the corner beads, make sure the beads are plumb, make sure everything's straight that way, and all you're doing then is working from the beads, and that's your guide. Problem is with the first video we had nothing. We had the first initial bead, but running towards the end there was nothing on the other side. There was nothing we could run to the other side to make sure that it was going to be easier to work with. So as you can see, I struggled, to work from that plumb line doesn't mean the rest of it's going to be, I was dipping in one side, coming out on the other, and this is part of the skill. which is really hard. There's no parameters. You're literally just doing it from your own body using a steel bar, trying to manipulate something that is potentially quite wet and sloppy into something flat, hard and completely plumb. It takes lots and lots of practice, and partially the reason I'm showing you this video is to show you that don't be disheartened when you try it for yourself. Don't be disheartened when you start trying to rule your walls. Don't be disheartened when you start doing solid plastering, because it's bloody hard work. It is hard work to get completely right. It's very grueling and it can be quite scary sometimes. So don't be disheartened by it. If you've done it before and you think, I know I can't pick it up, I'm getting it wrong, just keep doing it. You've seen in that video, I wasn't good. You know, that was with me having ruling experience beforehand. Like, I wasn't good at getting it completely plumb. I kept coming in and out, in, out, in, out, in, out, you know. And that is something you've got to deal with. But like I said, if you're working with products inside like hardwall, it's a lot more forgiving and it's a lot easier to work with. So if you want to see the full video on where I did plaster a wall from scratch, a brick wall that was like 20 mil out in places, it was horrible, and I got it flat, plumb and looking lovely, click this video here. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, click subscribe, because I've got loads of tutorials in this subject. Seriously, just get watching. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.